Former US President Jimmy Carter has died at the age of 100. Carter passed away in a hospice care centre in his hometown of Plains in the state of Georgia. His achievements in office included brokering a landmark peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. The end of his presidency in 1981 was by no means the end of his public service career.
Jimmy Carter was a president who found his true calling after his term in office. Carter grew up in the southern United States. He began his career in the US Navy, where he reached the rank of lieutenant. On his father's death, Carter took over the family's peanut farm. He was a deeply religious man and a supporter of the civil rights movement. His political career began in his native Georgia, where he eventually became state governor. He was one of the first politicians in the conservative South to call for the end of racial segregation. A Democrat, he became president in 1976, despite being a relative political unknown.
It's a long way from Plains to Washington, D.C., but we've made a great deal of progress lately.
Following the Watergate affair, America wanted to see a political outsider in the White House, and Jimmy Carter was the perfect candidate for the job.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear
That I will.
He wanted his presidency to break the cycle of political intrigue so prevalent in Washington and famously pronounced, "I will never lie." He made human rights the focus of his foreign policy. One of his greatest diplomatic successes was the Camp David Accords in 1978. Under Carter's mediation, the then Israeli Prime Minister and the Egyptian President signed their first peace agreement. But Carter's term was also plagued by economic woes and an energy crisis, and his approval ratings plummeted. The Iran hostage crisis from 1979 to 1981 sealed his political fate. Carter failed to secure the release of dozens of American hostages held by radical students at the US Embassy in the Iranian capital. That was something that American voters would not forgive. He lost the 1980 elections in what was a landslide victory for Ronald Reagan.
Sandy beachheads in the Pacific.
After his presidency, Jimmy Carter concentrated on his humanitarian work. He became an ambassador for peace and equality. Together with his wife Rosalind, who died in late 2023, he set up the Carter Center for the Advancement of Human Rights. As a former US president, his diplomatic influence on the international stage was unique. One of his successes was a peace mission to North Korea, where he helped defuse a crisis around Pyongyang's nuclear weapons program. Jimmy Carter was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. Even after being diagnosed with cancer, he continued to work on his many humanitarian projects. Carter's presidency may not have been the most pivotal in US history, but his term later gave him the diplomatic clout to promote his humanitarian values, something which gained him great respect and admiration around the world.
Well, for more on Jimmy Carter's life and legacy, let's speak now with DW reporter Stefan Simons in Washington, D.C. Stefan, great to see you. So, what have the reactions there in the US been to the death of Jimmy Carter?
Well, lots of official reactions, of course. The White House released a statement. Donald Trump, elected president, released a statement expressing his warm feelings, warm thoughts and prayers from Melania and him towards the Carter family. George Bush, former President George Bush, with a statement out there. The Clintons out there with a statement. So political Washington, if you will, all the other presidents, the Obamas, etc., everybody is releasing statements. In every statement, one thing everybody says, and that is that Jimmy Carter was a man of great character and great courage. I think that's the overarching theme there. And of course, that this man had two legacies. One, a very spotted one as a president of the United States from 77 to 81, and then a 43-year-long legacy built after his presidency. So that's the reaction. Of course, also the flags are all on half-staff right now on the White House. Of course, you see it right behind me, as well as on every other federal building.
Yeah, sure. He had an incredibly long public service career, Stefan. Let's actually talk a little bit more about his legacy. You've touched on it there. Tell us more about what we can expect and how people are remembering Jimmy Carter.
Well, I think as in his presidency, they will, as we heard in the piece too, remember the energy crisis. That was the time when Americans had to choose, depending on who is driving at what day of the week the car, because there wasn't enough gas, actually, and there was gas prices hit the roof, so to speak, for the first time. There was an oil price and gas price shock for the United States. He couldn't come over this. Iran hostage affair, of course, was a big slash into his political career. A failed attempt to rescue the hostages did the rest of this. But there was also good stuff. For example, as we heard, the Camp David Accord from 1978. You know, this was, you have to... if you don't remember it, you have to imagine this. President Carter basically locking up Anwar al-Sadat, the president of Egypt at the time, and Menachem Begin, the prime minister of Israel, at Camp David and say, you guys figure it out. We need to get out of here with a peace agreement between you and Israel. War is not an option anymore between Egypt and Israel. And they wanted to leave many, many times over, and he made them stay and basically really locked the door until they came to an agreement. And that's how you had the Egypt-Israel peace agreement, or Camp David peace accord. And that was a monumentous achievement. So that was, of course, the legacy number one. And as we have already said, legacy two, or the bigger, longer legacy he leaves behind, is he was a relentless human rights, civil rights, and women's rights activist. By the way, in his presidency, he appointed 40 female judges to federal courts. Before that, the U.S. had in total just 8. Right. So, you know, there was stuff going on. President Carter was really given a new wave of fresh air towards the American public and in the American society at the time.
Thanks, Stefan. We'll leave it there. DW reporter Stefan Simons remembering the life there of former US President Jimmy Carter, who's passed away at the great age of 100.